We are living in hyper-nationalist times, and in these times when you live in nationalism all around us, why do you have to talk about nationalism at all? I think that is one major reason why we need to talk about it, because we are so entrapped in this whole idea of nationalism, which is almost part of our everyday life. It is part of our economics, it's part of our social life, it's part of our political life, it's part of our daily lives. Why it is so, those reasons I will discuss when I go ahead. For us, nation and nationalism, these two things are not really new. It has been part of our legacy. We inherited this whole idea of India, idea of Indian nationalism, idea of Indian nationhood from our freedom struggle. Most of our great nationalist forefathers, they spent their lifetime, almost 100 years, in defining this nationalism for us. This nationalism remained almost intrinsic to our growing up years, even after independence. But today, there has been something different. There is something has happened that we have been forced to actually go back to nationalism. I don't think we need to be such great nationalists after independence, because nationalism for us was a tool to fight against the colonial oppressors. While we were doing that, our forefathers, and I will name them one by one, and all of us need to remember them, because for us nationalism is not something which we have created for ourselves. It was something which was passed on to us by people who were better thinkers, who thought about India better than us, who understood India better than us, who understood Indian society better than us. So I think we need to go back to them when we think about nationalism. And that's what I am going to do with you today. We see that there are a couple of names which are floated today in society in India and thrown at us by certain political leaders who are in power. They think that by using their names, they can somehow gain some mileage, some footage, and that agenda is very nakedly clear. We don't really have to struggle to understand why it is being done. And those names are Subhash Chandra Bose, Bhagat Singh. I include Maulana Azad. People are talking about him as well. People talk about Gandhi and Ambedkar all the time. Now, you cannot just talk about them. You just cannot name them. You have to understand them. You have to think what these people stood for. What were their ideals? What was the legacy they left behind? And the legacy I am talking today is of nationalism. What was the idea of nation and nationalism they perceived for us and left behind for us in their writings, in their statements, in their political speeches, and in various ways they try to convey a certain idea of India. We need to understand that nationalism actually is not something which we created ourselves. This is something which was imported from Europe. 19th century Europe actually created nationalism. It was needed by Europe in those times, and it was made use of by Germany, by Italy, by France, by so many other countries all over. And while doing that, they got into a different mode. They forgot about nationalism. They fought around nationalist idea, nationhood, etc. for years. And later on, they got out of it because they didn't really need to use it ever again, because they have used nationalism to the maximum. They fought wars in the name of nationalism, the First World War. They fought war in the name of nationalism, a Second World War. And so many other things happened. Now, that nationalism, that whole idea of nationhood was passed on to us by the British, by the Europeans, by the European experiences. And when people say, and there are a large number of people who believe that India was a nation for centuries, there are lots of people who have written about it. Tagore has talked about it, but we need to understand what sort of India Tagore talked about. Tagore didn't talk about a political identity, an identity which can give us a national identity. He talked of geographical identity, spiritual identity. He talked about so many other forms of Indianness. I want to use an example of Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who is actually called the father of Indian nationhood, Indian nationalism. He himself wrote, not once, several times, that nationalism is not an Indian idea. Nationalism we imported from abroad, from Europe. And we had to make use of that idea for our own struggle against colonial oppression, which we did. So this whole idea that India was a nation for centuries and India had been a nation for centuries is actually bogus. People like Lajpat Rai, who wrote extensively on this, were wrong on this premise, because one has to understand what sort of India we were, how divided we were, and this whole idea of nationhood was a very modern idea, a very imported idea. So that is something which we need to keep in mind. Now, when this idea comes to India, in the late 19th century onwards, and there are people like Tilak who start talking about it. There are people like Gopal Krishna Gokhale, people like Surendranath Banerjee, people like Mahadev Govind Ranade, all of them, and I'm taking these names because these are the people who began this whole idea of Indian nation and nationhood. Surendranath Banerjee, for example. All of them, or Bipin Chandra Pal, one can say, all of them defined nationalism in their own way. Many of them used religion to define it, but their usage of religion was a very, what should I say, was a very, very empathetic use. Empathetic in the sense that they didn't use religion to exclude anybody. They used religion in a very positive manner, in a very positive way. Like Bipin Chandra Pal, for example, and let me just give you one example. Bipin Chandra Pal, when he writes about India, he talks about India, and he talks about medieval India, for example. He says that India has been home to diverse people, diverse races who came to India, who had been coming to India for centuries, and the latest, before the British comers to India, were the Muslims. But their rule, and this is, I am quoting them, these are not my words. He said, when they came here, when they established their empires here, established their rule here, they did not intervene with our cultural practices. They did not meddle with our cultural lives. We existed with love and care with each other for centuries. Hinduism itself as religion was not challenged by any of them. So this is Bipin Chandra Pal. And all those who talk about perpetual bloodshed during the medieval centuries are actually wrong. They should understand, they should go back to these nationalist leaders of India whom they espouse and they venerate all the time. Mere veneration is not enough. You need to understand what they stood for, what they talked about, what they wrote about. And there are so many examples one can give from that period. But this is one example I thought I should give you to understand what sort of nation and nationalism we were passed on by our great leaders. When we go ahead, we find people like Sarojini Naidu, people like later on, and I gave example of not just politicians or political leaders. There are people like P.C. Ray, who was a great scientist of India, or J.C. Bose, for example. Look at their writings. They just didn't do science alone. They actually talked about India. They talked about Indian nation, Indian nationhood, and our togetherness historically. And P.C. Ray writes extensively on this issue. His book on his autobiography is full of references to medieval India. And he talks about medieval past, and I am emphasizing medieval because it is medieval past which is actually very, very important today. All the time we don't go back to ancient India. We only go back to medieval India as if India began during medieval centuries. No, that is an obsession we are living with today. We define our nationhood in the light of what happened in medieval India, what people in medieval India did to us. And they didn't do anything good. They actually destroyed us as a nation. This is something which is peddled all the time. So we need to go back to our nationalist leaders, how they saw our medieval past. Our scientists, our intellectuals, how they looked at medieval past while they were defining Indian nation or Indian nationalism or Indian nationhood. So this is something which is so essential to understand when we talk of nationalism. Nationalism cannot be defined only by the political leaders. It has to be defined in the lives of people who were intellectuals, who were poets, who were scientists, who were writers, who contributed intellectually to our definition of nationalism through their lives. So this is something so essential to understand. Unfortunately, all those who are trying to talk about Indian nationalism and nationhood are so far away from this India which I am talking about today. And we need to understand that this is essential India. This is an India which will define Indian nationhood. No, it is their lives and their writings which will define nationhood and nationalism for us, not actually the cheap peddling of ideas which are not based on any historical truth, which is based on absolutely imaginary facts. So you cannot imagine your present to understand the past. No, your past is dependent on the facts, what you inherit, not something you imagine, you like to imagine for your present. No, that is something which is being done today. That is some sort of a vandalization of history which we see happening all the time. We see history being peddled through WhatsApp. That is again, and I have seen lots of things being said on nationalism, Indian nationhood about on WhatsApp. Something which is circulated between 2,000, 3,000 people, and that becomes a historical fact. For people like us, it is an immense task to actually undo that untruth, because that fact has no basis in history, because that is imagined by some individual who has circulated it among a large number of his friends, his like-minded Indians, and they make it a historical fact. So this is something which is being done to our nationalism, our lives, and this is something which I need to question. And we all need to question that, because that is something which will destroy us as a nation, as a society. So when we talk of nationalism, we need to go back to our as I said, our great nationalist leaders, and especially those whom we talk about all the time and whom we think that they actually did great service to us, and I don't disagree on that count. They of course did. But the point is, you don't have to really just name them. You have to follow what they wrote. You have to follow what they said. And that's what you are not doing. And in the context of nationalism, when we talk of Subhash Chandra Bose, we forget that Subhash Chandra Bose was not INA. INA was his last ditch battle against the British. Subhash Chandra Bose is to be seen in the light of 1920s, in the 1930s, what exactly he did in those 2 decades, but that was the most formative phase of his life, politically and intellectually, because this is a phase when he wrote extensively, he mobilized the youth along with Jawaharlal Nehru all over the country, he formed Independence League, and he passed on an idea of India, of Indian nationalism, of scientific temper, scientific understanding, of women's rights. Well, these are all part of Subhash Chandra Bose's nationalism. You just can't exclude these ideas of Subhash Chandra Bose when we talk of nationalism. So this is what Subhash Bose did. We hardly talk about what actually Subhash meant by nationalism. Now, to quote few lines of Subhash Chandra Bose, he wrote once that communalism will go only when communal mentality goes. To destroy communalism is the responsibility of all. Only those who transcend this communal mentality will develop genuine nationalist mentality. So he is very clear. He said no communalist can be a nationalist. You cannot be a nationalist if you are a communal person. So that is Subhash Chandra Bose for us. And there are so many other things I can quote, because, but there's no time, I can't go into details. We talk of Ambedkar all the time. Now, Ambedkar did not write on nationalism very much. No, he generally kept away from such ideas, because his agenda was education, was development of a particular section of our oppressed society, which he did very well. But he didn't really talk much about nationalism for most part of his life. He wrote about nationalism only in a book which he wrote on Pakistan. And in 1930s, he formed a Labour Party in Maharashtra. As a Labour Party leader, he wrote few things, and I want to quote that. He says, if nationalism means the worship of the ancient past, the discarding of everything that is not local in origin and color, then Labour is talking in the context of his party which he has formed, then Labour cannot accept nationalism as its creed. Labour cannot allow the living faith of the dead to become the dead faith of the living. Now, this is what Ambedkar thought about nationalism. For him, nationalism was not a sacred creed. No, he was not infatuated by nationalism. Nationalism for him was a tool, and was not a divisive tool. It was a tool which will bind people together, which will bring people together, not only just on the basis of communities, but on the basis of class, poor and the rich. All of them have to come together to formulate this nationalism which Ambedkar thought is the true nationalism for us. Another name which circulates very widely these days and used by the right wing in their political programs is the name of our iconic nationalist Shaheed Bhagat Singh. Now, Bhagat Singh for us is a great Shaheed, no doubt about that, no disagreement on that issue. But the point is, Bhagat Singh actually left behind something more than martyrdom. No, there were so many martyrs before him. There were martyrs along with him, the two of his associates, and after him as well. But the point is, what exactly Bhagat Singh thought about India? What was his vision of independent India? What sort of India he wanted? What was nationalism for him? What sort of nationalism he wanted to actually leave behind? Like, he's one of those people about whom we cannot have any misunderstanding, because he was one person who wrote extensively as a young man. So we cannot at all misunderstand him. We can only misunderstand him if we deliberately want to ignore what he wrote, what he said. Only then we can do that. Otherwise, all his writings are available not in just Hindi and English. They are available in so many Indian languages. So that is all the more reason for us to understand what sort of India Bhagat Singh wanted to leave behind. What was the nationalism he thought he should leave behind for us. And he's writing in 1920s. For us, 1920s, and for me, I keep talking about it because 1920s was one of the most crucial phases of our political battle. And let me digress a bit to just talk about 1920s and the importance of 1920s in our nationalism and our national struggle. Because 1920s saw the first non-cooperation movement of Mahatma Gandhi's mass movement. It saw the birth of in 1925 of RSS, of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the right-wing group which is empowered today. It saw the founding of the Communist Party of India. It saw the flourishing of revolutionary ideology of Bhagat Singh and his associates in 1920s. It also saw the birth of the Tablighi Jamaat, the Muslim communalist groups which came up in 1920s. And it was also a decade which saw a huge labor movement in industrial areas. So it was a decade which saw a huge activity all over India. And a lot of communalism as well, because after non-cooperation movement, our nationalism was totally divided into communities, Hindus and Muslims, after the Khilafat movement and after non-cooperation, Chauri Chaura, etc. So all that is part of, I am not talking about that in detail. The point is, what exactly Bhagat Singh talked about nationalism. When he talks about nationalism, he believes that you cannot have a nation, you cannot have nationalism unless you start thinking of Indians as one. And in this context, he is not just talking about Hindu-Muslim issue. He believes that you cannot be a nationalist if you divide your own people on caste lines. And he writes a big article 928 where he says that why are we talking about our demands to the British? Why do we want an Indian nation, a freedom? If we divide our own people, if we suppress our own people, if we discriminate against our own people, our nationalism cannot be a successful nationalism unless we forget about this untouchability, about oppression, about discrimination in society. So we have no right actually to ask the British that we need equality. What sort of equality you want? So your nationalism need to be all pervasive. It has to include everybody, all members of society. And these are all his writings, and I'm just paraphrasing him. And you can go and read. And I always challenge people to go back and read Bhagat Singh. Don't read me, read him. Go back and read what he wrote. That will give you a better idea about what sort of India he wanted, what sort of nationhood he wanted, what sort of nationalism he stood for. He writes about the press, and he says that the responsibility of the press is to build a composite nationality. And unfortunately, the same press which should have been responsible to build composite nationality, composite nationhood, is actually dividing us. These are all his words. And he said they use provocative headlines to divide people. So unless this goes on, we just cannot think of a nation or nationalism which is composite, which is inclusive. So people like him stood for this sort of nationalism. People talk about his why I'm an atheist, and I always say that why I'm an atheist was not actually a harangue against God. It was surely, he wrote about God and his own antipathy towards the idea of God, but he was writing something more than that. He wrote about scientific thinking. He wrote about leadership. He said you cannot be, and he is writing in the context of Mahatma Gandhi, and you can use it even today. He said you cannot be a blind follower of any leader. You have to introspect. You have to judge him by his deeds, by his actions, and you just can't be blind follower of anybody, whether it is Mahatma Gandhi or it is somebody else. So he is someone who is talking in this sort of language as a young man, and we need to understand that these are the people who talked of nationalism, of idea of India, of idea of Indian nation, defined it for us in 1920s, and unfortunately we don't care to even remember what exactly they wrote about our India, what sort of vision they stood for. And this is something which we need to go back to. And unfortunately, we do everything else except going back to the ideas of our forefathers, whom we venerate all the time. We talk about Sardar Patel. We don't talk about what he wrote, what he spoke, what sort of India he wanted. There are his speeches. I just want to quote one instance, because Sardar Patel is talked about so much and venerated so much, and he deserves to be venerated. I have no idea, I have no disagreement on that. In 1949, 2 years after independence, he goes to Madras, gives a speech, and talks about the building of new India, Indian nation, what sort of India we want. And he very clearly says that I disagree with the left and the right. The left wants to build an India which is socialist, which is on the Bolshevik lines, and he being a person who didn't agree with that idea of India, so he disagreed with them. And he said, I have invited them to join the Congress party. Let us build India together. Let us be part of this project of building new India. But they are not listening to me. This is a complaint of Sardar Patel. Now he comes to the right wing. He said, the right wing actually believes that they can somehow create a Akhand Bharat. No, this is something so damaging to the whole soul of India that you want to think of Akhand Bharat when you have already suffered so much during partition. No? And I have told them, please do what you say, and this will not work. And these are Sardar Patel's words. This will not work, that you say something and do something else. Start respecting national flag. No? And he's saying this in 1949, which means it was not being done. And Sardar Patel, as a Home Minister, as a Deputy Prime Minister, had to remind them that you need to respect the national flag. And if you respect the national flag, only then you can be a nationalist. How can you be a nationalist without respecting the national flag? So these are a few things which we need to understand, we need to remember, need to share and talk about, because nationalism is not something empty. It's not an empty word, or it's not a political rhetoric. It is a fact. If it is a fact, then it need to have substance. And that substance you have to inherit from your nationalist struggle, from your leaders who actually did so much churning around these ideas and left behind a composite nationalism, an indivisible nationalism, an integrated nationalism. You can give any name to it. A revolutionary nationalism, an empathetic nationalism. Empathetic nationalism is Mahatma Gandhi's idea. He said, for nationalism you don't need an enemy. You can be a nationalist without funding another. So today what you are doing is, you actually want to be a nationalist only when you have an enemy. And you define your nationalism vis-a-vis the enemy you have found, within or without. So that is something which is questionable in the light of what you have inherited from your forefathers, people who have left behind the whole idea of nationalism, who have actually, as I began by saying that they were better thinkers, they knew the idea of India much better than us, and they actually struggled to create an India which we carried forward all these years. But now somehow a situation has come when we need to go back to the words, to the ideas, to the vision of all these people I have talked about briefly. I could actually refer to Maulana Azad as well, because he was someone who was battling the two communalisms to defend his composite nationalism. His idea of indivisible composite nationalism was a challenge, because he battled more than anybody else the Hindu communalist and the Muslim communalists in the form of Muslim League. He decided that it is possible only when you aggressively put forward your idea of composite nationalism, and that is available in his presidential speeches at least twice, one in 1923, another is in 1940 in Ramgarh, where he extensively dealt with whole idea of nationalism. What is India? Who's India? India belongs to whom? India belongs to everyone who lives here. Hindus came to this part of the world much before the Muslims, but Muslims have spent more than 1,000 years now. That are his words in 1940. Now they have a right, like anybody else, to claim India. So for him, Indian nationalism is a composite nationalism, where all communities, castes, classes have to be together to form Indian nationhood. And he kept on. He actually wrote a long piece called Islam and Nationalism, where he defines nationalism in the light of Islam. He says a composite nationalism is possible because the Prophet in the 7th century formed the first nation in the Islamic world in Medina by forming a collaborative, a composite nationalism, bringing Jews and Muslims together. Now, if Prophet can do it, so why we can't do it in India by putting Hindus and Muslims together? So this was the idea of nationalism which was left behind by Maulana Azad. And I say it with a lot of conviction that for me, Maulana Azad did not lose in 1947, because people say that he lost the battle because India was divided. He didn't, because he was able to convince a large section of Indian population, Muslim population particularly, that composite nationalism is possible. Living together is possible. And large number of people decided to stay back. And they decided to stay back because people like Maulana Azad, Hussain Ahmad Madni, Allah Bakhsh Samru, and so many others. There are so many names and we don't even know about them. People who are against partition. There were people who organized in 1940 a huge conference of Azad Muslim Conference, as it is called, which was against partition. In the same year, when Muslim League decided to pass a resolution on partition, in the same year, 2 months later, in Delhi, in this city itself, more than 1 lakh Muslims gathered under the leadership of Allah Bakhsh Samru, who decided and declared almost a battle against the Muslim League and their idea of Islamic nationalism and division of India on the lines of community, two-nation theory, etc. So this is something which we need to remember, that our nationalism is not just an idea based on majoritarian nationalism. It was not just Hindu nationalism. People like Bhagat Singh, I forgot to mention that, Bhagat Singh was an atheist. If he was a proclaimed atheist, he wrote extensively on that. If he was an atheist, then how can he be a nationalist? By the definition of people who want religion to be part of nationalist identity. So, which means that you don't need religion at all. If religion was a nationalist identity, then the whole idea of two-nation theory was debunked in 1971. So there is more to nationalism than mere religion. There is culture, there is language, there is the feeling of togetherness. All that is necessary to form a nation, to form a nationalism, to live happily together with one idea of nationalism. All that can come back to us only when we go back to all these leaders who actually went through this churning, who defined composite nationalism for us, which came in handy for us for decades. Today it is under threat, and many of us have to rise and defend it and go back to our forefathers, go back to their writings, to their ideas, to explain what sort of India we want. We don't want divisive India. We don't want India dependent on caste, community or religion. That is not the India, that is not the vision which we left behind. We were left behind. We decided in 47 to be a democratic secular country, not like our sibling which decided immediately to be an Islamic nation. No? We rejected this idea of Islamic nation in 1947 itself. There is no need to go back to that vision, and we have seen that choice which our sibling made and where they are and where are we. So if we want to be like them, the mirror image of what our neighbor is doing to itself, then the choice is before us, and we can very well decide what sort of national identity we want and what exactly is progressive for us, or what exactly is foundational idea of India for us. No? Thank you.